to order.
I will call this meeting to order. This is a committee meeting for the
Ad hoc pension committee meeting of the board of directors of Kentucky Housing Corporation.
What he just said. The date today is February 22nd. The time is 1:06 p.m. Do we have a quorum?
We do have a quorum and the press has been notified.
Thank you, Tracy.
Mm-hmm.
So then, do I have minutes from the last meeting that need to be approved?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do we have?
I won't have them on the screen. They were sent to everyone
Okay.
in the package that you received. Hopefully everyone had a chance to review those.
Okay. Did everyone have a chance to review those minutes? Do we have any changes or modifications that anyone would like to make to those? Okay. Being none, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Steve, I'll make a motion.
Susan, second.
Okay, do we have any discussion? All right. And do I have a vote to approve the minutes?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Do I have any next business then, Jeremy?
No, the next item is to move on into the presentation, and
Very well.
Jim Statler will take over.
Then let's turn it over to Jim to take on with the presentation.
Unmuting. Thank you, Madam Secretary. I think Jeremy is driving the PowerPoint. Some of this is repeating some slides, just it's been a month since we got together. But this committee is an ad hoc committee of the board charged with hearing the various options, recommendations of management in connection with possibly withdrawing from KERS and setting up our own pension plan, or alternately staying in KERS and continuing along the route we've been on for several years. Again, repeating a little bit of the role of the pension committee. You will be reviewing with staff the actuaries who are on the call today. There are Ed Coble and Todd Green from Kavanaugh McDonald, with us from Georgia, and then legal counsel Alan Paw is here from the McBrayer Group. They are on the call today. They are assisting us in making our decisions. Part of the role of the committee is to ask questions of us and our advisors as we try to get through this exercise of deciding what we want to do. Inform KHC of concerns from external partners to the extent that you should hear them from outside. Here at staff recommendation, as I said, and then present a final recommendation to the full board on March 25th of this year. And so we're the second of 3 meetings into that, and we have some additional information. We're getting a little bit more into the weeds, a little bit more into the dollars. Here we go. The recap of the challenges, if you will. A couple slides there, Jeremy. We had a balancing act. There we go. We were trying to balance our mission and financial stability of the organization and the staff. And collectively, we feel that the mission trumps stability and staff. There's a fine balance that we have to draw here, but we need to be around 20, 25, 30 years from now to continue to fulfill the mission the Kentucky Housing Corp has filled since 1972, its formation. We need to have, in my opinion, the flexibility, or our opinion actually, the flexibility to be able to recruit, retain, and also deliver our mission. That said, we're using this opportunity of exploring the different options available to us from a strategic standpoint so that we can position our organization down the road to be able to have as much control as possible over what has become our largest expense, which is compensation and benefits, now totaling over 2/3 of our total budget. And so we have limited control over some of it, i.e. the pension, and we we are impacted by the ins and outs and ups and downs of the pension and trying to resolve the pension plan issue at KERS. So we have a kind of a mission statement or an impact statement here. Strategically, we believe the mission will best be served by having long-term organizational stability through three major items: exercising prudent financial management, minimizing external financial impacts, and maximizing internal control of corporate costs, particularly personnel costs. And you know, they seem to sound very straightforward and very obvious, but when we look at some of the impacts and some of the items we do have control over and what we do not have control over, you can see that we have some decisions in front of us that we hope will strategically set the corporation on a path that it will best serve its mission to the Commonwealth and the citizens of Kentucky. Some concerns, we voiced these concerns before. We have different options available to us: staying in, withdrawing, hard freeze, soft freeze, all the terms that we've used before. But let's repeat a couple of them here. Staying in KERS without HB 8, which is the pending legislation, carries a significant comparative cost to the other options. Now, the status of HB 8 is it has passed the House. It has been taken to the Senate, but there's been no action to our knowledge or what we've seen as far as getting it assigned to a committee or getting a reading before the full Senate. And so it is, like I said, through the House, but pending action in the Senate. If KHC number 2 here were to exit KERS, we have the risk of skilled and knowledgeable employees leaving the corporation to fulfill some of their, or complete, if you will, the vesting issue options available in KERS that they would lose if we were to exit KERS. If we stay with KERS, recruiting could be problematic, as new hires do not view KERS as an attractive benefit. This is really touching on the strategic look that we've got, and that is that we are having some pushback from when we're trying to recruit some folks. They either don't like the Tier 3 pension, or they have concerns about all the various press and issues surrounding KERS, that it has become a little bit more problematic to sell them on the corporation as a member of KERS. And then we have fluctuating pension costs could put KHC at risk of being unable to meet our mission. And we've seen that fluctuation every time there's a new actuarial run done, to the extent that one assumption gets blown out, or contributions get shorted, or investment returns get shorted or over. I mean, that's both sides. We have fluctuating pay-in rates, if you will, that makes budgeting difficult and takes control away from us of how much our pension cost is going to take. And so these concerns are still there, and hopefully by the end of the day here, we will have addressed most of those and keep moving forward. If you will, then we'll go to the financial impact. Here's the chart that we've seen before. There are, again, 4 options that we're dealing with. There is a nuance of staying in with no HB 8, and that is, will we get a discounted pay-in rate like we've enjoyed the last 3 years vis-a-vis the rest of the non-quasi participants in KERS, or will we have to gravitate to the main or the primary pay-in rate, which is significantly higher than what we've been paying on? So the reason I bring that up is the comparative number is what we've been paying, and so we've been paying in over $5 million a year, and as we go through some of these options, you know, it's been difficult to be able to pay that $5 million. If it goes up, it's going to be even more difficult, and so we just really have to have a good solid look at each of the options. But again, staying in, going bottom left over across the top to the right, stay in KERS, no HB 8, which is option 1A. And then 1B is the next one, stay in KERS with HB 8, which has not passed and is a considerable improvement over staying in KERS without HB 8. And so it becomes a viable possibility, whereas staying in without HB 8 is pretty much a non-starter. Exiting KERS with a soft freeze, which is an expensive option. We'll get to that in just a second. And then exiting KERS with a hard freeze, which is right now from the dollars and cents that we've run, the most financially positive or easiest way out from a financial standpoint, but it has issues that go with it as well besides financial. So if we look at the different options, and these are not in necessarily the same order that we just went over the chart, because we're going from least financially viable to most financially viable. is if we stay in KERS and HB8 does not pass, there's no change for the employees. We have a little bit of a staff section conversation going on after the financial piece here. We begin absorbing the 85.03% contribution rate. Now that compares to 49.47 that we've been paying for the last 3 years. And so if we're paying $5 million at 49%, you can see that we're going to be paying in the high sevens at 85%. And so the budget impact would be significant. And one other thing about this, and goes back to the control or non-control that KHC can or cannot exercise, is we don't have much say in what the contribution rate is. The contribution rate is subject to change every year based on the vagaries of how the plan works and or the desires of the General Assembly in dealing with the pension issue across the board. The estimated cash cost of this, and we go over 30 years because that's the amortization period of the plan. And it's also the amortization period of say HB8's repayment plan is to defease the huge debt that we owe. So we look at cash flows over 30 years. And if we have to pay in 85% of our compensation for the next 30 years, we're going to be writing checks totaling $288 million. That's future value. The present value of that $288 million is still a whopping $175 million. And so those are big numbers. They're big numbers in general, and they're big numbers for Kentucky Housing Corporation as well. If we go to the next option, which is option 2, again, the 1B option is a little bit more favorable than option 2. So these are in order of least favorable to most favorable from a financial standpoint. But again, option 2, the exit with the soft freeze, the tier 1 and 2 employees continue contributing to KERS. We prepay the employer contribution based on actuarial assumptions so that we quit paying on those employees even though they remain with the company and they remain in KERS. So we prepay that in the lump sum or the financing mechanism that HB1 enables us to use. Then the tier 3s and the new hires, well, the tier 3s exit the existing plan and begin contributing to the new defined contribution plan. And any new hires would also be participating in the new defined contribution plan. And so with the soft freeze, we would have to stand up a replacement plan in the form of a DC plan, and tiers 3 and any new hires would participate in that plan. KERS would bill us for our unfunded liability associated with exiting the plan, including the prepayment of the future employer contributions for those folks who are staying in there. And then we have the option under HB1 to pay that in a lump sum or installments. And so the figures that you see here assume a lump sum because the lump sums are smaller numbers than if we were to pay it in installments and finance it inside KERS instead of potentially outside KERS. Again, it's a fairly expensive proposition, $149 million in future dollars and $131 million in present value. So again, that's big checks one way or the other. If we go to the next one, which is exit with the hard freeze, all employees would exit KERS and begin contributing to the new defined contribution plan. And KERS would bill us for our unfunded liability, which we can pay in either a lump sum or installments. And so this is a full hard exit. All employees no longer are participating in the future vesting service, what have you, in the KERS plan, and everybody would revert to the defined contribution plan that we would stand up on the outside of KERS. Again, the numbers at the bottom of this schedule are the lump sum pay-ins. The estimated cost over 30 years for the hard freeze is $109 million, and the present value $97 million. So we're making progress on what it's going to cost to either for this option. And unfortunately for me, I misspoke that this was the least the least opportune, the positive option to the most positive, because option 3, exiting with the hard freeze, from a financial standpoint, costs us fewer dollars in future dollars and also present value. And then again, this one is out of order. I apologize for not going from worst to best from a financial standpoint. But should HB8 pass, and the terms and conditions of HB8 apply, we would begin, there'd be no change for the employees because we would stay in KERS. And KHC would begin absorbing the 60.92 contribution rate, which is also subject to change, but on different bases than the 85.03 if HB8 does not pass and we stay in KERS. but that number is also subject to change based on either financial performance of the fund, KERS fund, or changes in assumptions or legislation or what have you. And the estimated cash cost of that plan then is $194 million, and the present value of that $119 million. And so you can see that in all the cases, the bucks are big. The best one from a financial standpoint, using the present value of the hard freeze, is $97 million, which we are looking at if the committee does go with the hard freeze, we would exit with a hard freeze and pay a lump sum of 97 plus or minus $1 million. Now, that number is subject to change. The basis for the freeze numbers are an actuarial valuation that was done in January of 2020. They were not updated for evaluation here. Our actuaries who are on the call with us today are looking at what another year does to the hard freeze number and what another year under our belt does to the soft freeze number. There's a couple moving parts there. On the hard freeze, we would pay another year's worth of vesting service because another year has elapsed. At the same time, we've paid in over $5.3 or $5.4 million to help fund that during fiscal 20, excuse me. And so the other thing that could cause this to change is if the census of our employees changes. This was done with the census of our employees from June of 2019. And the final bill will be based on our census at June of 2021. And so to the extent that we've hired more people, or we've retired, several people have retired or left the company, that number is subject to change. It will also include an amount for the pension cost of unused sick time or unused sick leave, which is one of the metrics that the pension fund uses. But if we were to exit the fund, they would send us a bill based on the unused sick leave that we'd have to report to them, and that would cause the number to go up. It will cause the absolute numbers of all the options to go up, but not necessarily make one more tenable than the other, because we would have to pay the sick leave regardless of the option that we choose. It would just change the days, the timing of paying that issue. So it's a little bit of a present value deal, but not enough to cause one plan, that the most viable plan, to become less than or worse than the most viable plan. And we've talked to some folks who have exited the plan under the old legislation. The bill they got from KRS was always higher than the estimate. In one case, they were surprised at how much higher. I'm working hard with our actuaries on making sure that we're not going to be unduly surprised with a number that would come back if we were to elect either the hard or soft freeze. But we really feel at this point, if we want to control our destiny over the next 25 or 30 years, that being subject to the ups and downs and the vagaries of each annual actuarial calculation from KRS and possible legislative changes, that we'll be doing what we've been doing the last 5 or 6 years, and that is about this time of every year, wondering what's going to come out from the General Assembly, and then in November, waiting to see how well or how poorly the overall fund did, either from an investment standpoint or from an actuarial assumption standpoint. And so we prefer to have a little bit more control over our destiny. The recruiting thing has become an issue, and the dollars from the hard freeze put it in first place overall. And so I'm going to stop talking at this point. There's an employee impact section coming up after that, and take any questions from anybody. There's a lot of moving parts. I come in every day and say, oh, this part moved a little bit and that part didn't, but I'm pretty comfortable with the numbers. I've supplied these figures to our actuarial consultants. They are looking at them, challenging them. There's no pride of authorship. If I made a mistake, I certainly hope they would point it out, and we'd revisit this. But I beat it up pretty good, and I'm pretty comfortable with relativity of the numbers, if not the absolutes of the numbers. And you might ask, why are we lump summing on the freezes instead of paying in installments? To pay in installments under HB1, we're financing at 5.25% over 30 years, and with rates doing what rates where they are, and our access to cash in bank debt, if not other debt, it's my opinion that we can put it on a shorter pay in, and also at a lower rate. And so with that shorter pay in will come a lower rate. And so I'm optimistic that we can accomplish that. I've talked to some bankers about it already. They are receptive to possibly financing the lump sum over fewer years, and then we'd be totally done with the unfunded liability that would be besieged us for 30 years if we stay in. So again, let me open up to questions, and I absolutely will be quiet now.
Well, first off, Jim, I'll go ahead and start. Great job, by the way. I mean, you did a great job last year as well as this year.
Thank you, Barry.
On putting this out there to make it easily digestible for even me. But I do have a question regarding the contribution plan. What does that look like? Because we're trying to balance all this stuff out. We're going to go from the pension to the contribution plan, or some deviation thereof. So what does that actually look like now? And what's that going to cost?
And Jeremy's going to speak a little bit to that later on, and Alan Paul, who's on here from McBrayer, is consulting with us or helping us get through the regulatory issues of a tax compliant DC plan. Basically, what in general terms, and I've thrown a couple of percentages around, that this year we're paying our normal costs, including the paying back the unfunded accumulated liability of sins of the past. We're paying at 49.5%. And if House Bill 8 gets passed, then we'll be paying at 61%. And if it doesn't and we stay in, then we'll be paying at 85%. The numbers that you're seeing here assume we're paying in at 5.35%, which equates to, on the private sector side, a reasonable corporate match in a 401k type environment. And so we would go from 49, possibly 61, or even 85% per dollar of payroll down to 5.35%. Now, to get to that, we have to write a big check in the lump sum payout. But the goal is to 10 years from now look more like the private sector and be able to compete for talent in the private sector, compete against the private sector for the type of talent that we have, using a plan that looks more like what our recruits are looking for in the form of an overall compensation and benefits package. And so from a running rate standpoint, obviously in year 10, if we're only paying in at 5.35%, and otherwise we'd be paying it in the 50%, it's a difference of $800,000 versus $6 million a year. And so you get relief on future budgets, creation of liquidity that's available to serve the mission. I mean, this would, if we're able to handle $5 million now, and we're only going to have to pay $800,000 per year 10 years from now, that's going to free up $4 million of available capital and liquidity to do other things to further our mission. And so it's like we're swapping a big bill and a big check now for the ability to recruit and also keep our costs under control. Anybody else? Well, I'm going to turn it over to Amy Smith now. She's going to talk a little bit about the employee impact. This is not a minor impact. We're dealing with our employees and their lives and that. So the balance between mission, finance, and staff. This is the staff part and the employee impact that we are taking into consideration. I'll turn it over to Amy.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate it. Jeremy, if you don't mind to forward on to the next slide. So Jim has already stated that from the deputies perspective, Winston's perspective, really the executive team, for almost 2 years now, we've been talking about needing to make this decision that is in the best interest of KHC. Really, it's a financial decision, and we have to consider what's best for Kentucky Housing's future. But there is an employee impact on this, and we're fully aware of that. That's what's made it such a hard decision, and why we've kept tabs really on the staff almost individually over the last 18 months. So for Jim's goal, and really our goal as a whole, it's to make the best decision for KHC's future. But when I look at it from our perspective, the part that I bring to the table and the goal that I have focused on is really to transition well those who are eligible to retire or need to stay in KRS for a little bit longer, because we knew that in choosing a hard freeze, if that became the option, that we would have staff that needed to go back into system to complete vesting points or complete their 27 years and get the retirement package that they had been planning on, and or we would have staff that we really needed to retain a little bit longer but would be ready to go. So my goal has been working with Jim and the other staff to make sure that we can transition well. So I want to share a couple of things with you, and then you can ask me any questions that you'd like. So really this year, as opposed to last year when we looked at this decision, 29 staff of our 217 that are in the calculations, it's 13%, are going to be impacted by the hard freeze that we are recommending as the most inexpensive option. So the numbers are down from last year, which is a very positive thing for us. And this number includes those staff who are not going to meet certain vesting points for their retirement in KRS. So if you're familiar with the state system, those are 20 years for getting your health insurance paid for fully or partially in retirement, 25 years for being eligible for early retirement if you're not yet 55, and 27 years for being eligible for full retirement if you're not yet 55. One of the things that I want to say at the beginning, and we've highlighted it here with an underline and a bold, staff will not lose benefits. Their benefits are simply freezing in KRS. So any of our staff, and this is what is happening now with the staff, they are looking at whether or not they can continue to work at Kentucky Housing, whether it's best for them to retire, or whether they need to find a job in a participating KRS agency to finish out their years of service, either to meet a vesting point or to retire at the length of time that they wanted to serve under KRS and get their full retirement, or the retirement that they had planned to receive. So I want to make that clear that even in the event of a hard freeze, staff's benefits in KRS simply freeze unless they leave Kentucky Housing and go to a participating agency. So staff in no way are losing benefits. A year ago, that felt a lot more harmful. When we talked about this decision a year ago, employees really had a little over 90 days to decide what they needed to do and to make some really big decisions related to their retirement. This year, because it's been 18 months now since we had those initial discussions with staff about the possibility of withdrawing from the system, they've had 18 months. We've paid for them to see a financial advisor if they so chose. We have had both Kentucky retirement folks in to meet with people by tier, as well as deferred compensation to come in and meet with people by tier. They've had a lot of opportunities to talk to retirement, to purchase some time if they could get that purchased in the 18 months since we looked at the decision before. So we're in a very different place with the staff at this point in time than we were when we looked at the decision initially in 2019. So I wanted to explain that as well, because that has changed our thoughts related to how the staff will be impacted by a hard freeze. At this point, I can tell you just from talking to the staff that are eligible or need to make a change to stay in system, they are just ready for a decision to be made. So we are working with staff. As you can imagine, retirement's very personal experience. You've got personal times. People are reaching out to Jim, and they're reaching out to me and to our human resources director to talk about their own specific situation. And we are helping them however we can, whether they want to make a move back into a KRS participating agency, and we have had a handful do that in the last year, or whether they are just waiting out the decision or actually looking to retire. One other thing that I'll mention about the staff that are eligible to retire, we had a large hiring, I guess, piece of time in the mid to late 90s. So no matter the pension decision, we are still going to have an issue with these 29 folks and some additional ones looking to retire here in the next 1 to 3 years. So no matter the decision, we are still having staff impacted by retirement. So our focus has become then making sure that these employees are transitioning well and documenting their workload, and in some instances, training a successor. We have a very rigorous succession planning process that we've put in place so that we can minimize the impact on the corporation. And we're finding that staff really want to do that. They want to transition well. They want their workload to be wrapped up. They want to leave their knowledge with someone else. So I feel that our goal here is not to prevent people from retiring or to prevent people from going back into KRS if we hard freeze. It's really just to help them transition well, both for themselves and for business continuity for Kentucky Housing. So just to finish up the bullet points here, staff are not losing benefits in a hard freeze. They can complete their years of service to receive their full benefits. They would just need to go back into a KRS participating agency to do so. And then the fourth bullet I've already mentioned a little bit, but we are working right now to mitigate knowledge loss and ensure business continuity. So directors and supervisors, we're talking to them on a monthly basis. They know which of their staff are eligible, and their staff have in a lot of cases already spoken with them. And we do have folks in a lot of places for key positions already cross-training in the event of turnover in the next 6 months to 2 years. So I feel like the 18 months we've had since we began this process has been very beneficial to the corporation and has given us a lot more flexibility than we had this time in 2020 when we were trying to make the decision fairly quickly. One thing that is another impact that we want to make sure to mention is that for the most part, I've talked about Tier 1 employees. Those are employees that started prior to 2008 in the system for KRS, but Tiers 2 and 3 are also KRS participants. They're not as impacted by the hard freeze in terms of their benefit, but they were not vested, or they would not be vested in this case, in the insurance benefit if we were to hard freeze. So all of the out-of-pocket costs that they paid toward having a percentage of their health insurance in retirement would be forfeited. So that is another impact outside of the Tier 1 impact that would impact a handful of our employees as well who are in Tiers 2 and 3. Let me stop there and see if you all have particular questions or if there's anything I can address in terms of employee impact. Yes, Secretary Johnson. I think you might be muted. Sorry.
I'm always muted. I have dogs and I
Me
never know
too.
what they're going to do. So I try to mute to be respectful. Out of the 29 staff, let's see, my backwards math here, you got about what, 200 employees then?
Yes, a little over 200. We're almost at 220.
Okay. How many of that would you say are Tier 1 employees? Because they're the ones that are going to have the biggest impact no matter what you do.
Sure. Jim, we had that slide originally, but did we take it out of this presentation? We can send you all after. We have a pie chart that shows we are over half Tier 1 employees at Kentucky Housing right now. Is that right, Jim?
I've got the
Based
old
on the
slide here,
graph.
and I was talking and I was muted as well.
You're
and
fine.
I don't have a dog in my office.
Yeah, I think we removed it from this one, but Jim, can you read those numbers? Do you have it in front of you?
53% of our staff are Tier 1. Now that's divided between 1A and 1B, and the big differentiation there is the robustness, if you will, of the insurance benefit. And then we have 12% is Tier 2, and then 35% in Tier 3.
Okay.
So it's about 111 in Tier 1.
Yeah.
Okay.
So our numbers, Secretary Johnson, they're not all of the 111 Tier 1 staff. So if you want a little more specifics, we have 7 that will miss their 20-year health insurance vesting point.
Okay.
We have,
I'm sorry, say that
oh,
again.
no, go ahead. We have 7 staff who will miss their 20-year insurance vesting point. We have 14 that will not make it to their early 25 years in, and they're not 55, which is also required if you don't hit your 25. And then we have 8 that will not be at 27 years, which is your full retirement, and they're also not age eligible, which is 55. So we'll give you those numbers. Those are the ones we're talking about when we talk about 29 or 13% impacted. But we're tier 1 employees, we have, I believe Jim said 111, which is about right. We've had a few others retire just recently, but yes.
And then you said that you've given people the opportunity to buy time. I mean, well, not giving them, but people
No.
have had the opportunity to buy
Yes.
time, and I've bought time, and I know that it's expensive, and you buy it over years because you have to buy it with pre-tax money. So if you have deferred comp, you can do that, or you make it over payments with your pay. Is it set up so that if you come out of the system, can they continue to pay it like or it has to be while they're in the system?
It's our understanding that any agreements that are already entered upon on June 30th, when the hard freeze goes into effect, their agreements would come full due. So unless they could pay that off, and our employees, that was a problem when we talked to them the first time because they only had about 90 days. Now they've had an additional 18 months, so they've gone back and reconsidered some of those things. I would not know if anyone else had purchased time, but we've been talking to them about all those options. We have a pretty robust campaign called Know Your Tier, Know Your Benefits that we launched in the fall of 2019, along with a set of amount of money for people to be reimbursed to see a financial counselor. And we also gave them access to a personal liaison at the Kentucky retirement systems, as well as had staff come in. So the time has really helped employees minimize the impact, or at least mitigate the impact. I won't say minimize, I'll say mitigate the impact. But yes, anyone on a payment plan, if we hard freeze, the payment plan would end June 30, and they would only receive service credit that they had paid for up till that point.
Amy, unless they decided to move to another job.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. That's all only if they remained at Kentucky Housing Corporation. Yes.
And then I have one more, maybe a two-parter, but one more question. So when the hard freeze comes, is that like leaving service? Like all of my annual time, sick leave credit, everything then is credited toward my retirement account? Or if I do have a service purchase, it can go toward my service purchase agreement at that time, or deferred comp, and then I could roll it to my service purchase or whatever? Is it like I'm leaving service and everything is credited toward that account at that moment in time?
That is our understanding, and we've been working with retirement on that for a year. Our understanding is that on June 30th, we would then send retirement a list of every employee's sick leave on file with Kentucky Housing Corporation. And if they continue to work for Kentucky Housing, it's just like leaving any agency and going to work at a non-participating agency. If you left today and went to work at Walmart, it would be the same thing. You would bank everything with retirement and bank your sick leave at Kentucky Housing until you were ready to use it. And then in 5 years, you come back and want to retire because you're age eligible or you're just ready to retire. It's the same thing. It works the same way as just leaving any agency would be today. The only thing is, unfortunately, the agency is making the decision, not the employee. If that employee chooses to work at Kentucky Housing, which some may for another year or 2 or 3, they're just prolonging their retirement, and they could come back into system in 3 years, pick up right where they were, and continue working toward their retirement in another participating KRS agency.
Okay. And I don't know if you'll know this, but do you happen to have any employees that are falling in between that 2006 and 2008 period where they would have where they wouldn't have had that opportunity to be able to buy the time at 15 years?
We do. I don't know how many off the top of my head, but I'm fairly certain that we probably have some in that time frame. And I can get that number for you.
It's okay. All right.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Do y'all have any other questions for me? If not, I'll turn it back to Jim. Thank you all.
Thank you, Amy. And with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy. He's going to talk a little bit about the defined contribution plan and then what hurdles we have to jump through to effectuate a withdrawal from KERS and cover that little piece of it. And then we got one little schedule after that. So Jeremy.
Thank you, Jim. So you've heard from both Jim and Amy that, you know, the driving factor in all of this from a decision-making standpoint for the executive team has been the mission. KHC is formed to provide a certain service to the Commonwealth, and that is first and foremost why we exist, and that's got to drive every decision we make pretty much at the organization. That's kind of a three-legged stool for us in this. It's the mission, then the financial stability, and then the employees. And our mission is one that is very dependent on having high-quality staff. Currently, our pension system is one that is expensive and has no flexibility for either us or our staff. It is a mandatory contribution system for the staff. They don't have control over their investments, for example, and we don't have any flexibility in the terms of that pension system. So it's expensive and with no flexibility. If we exit in a hard freeze, we're going to move into a defined contribution plan that is our plan. We control that plan document. And if we need to make amendments to that plan over time, we can do so. It's going to give us a lot of flexibility. You know, Jim has talked about the cost of the current pension system and how much we would have to contribute on an annual basis as match to our employee contributions and to catch up on past unfunded balances. In contrast to that, a defined contribution plan, you're talking about something that those who are in private sector will be much more familiar with. It's akin to a 401k plan. It won't be a 401k plan, but it'll be akin to one. And, you know, we have a human resources group that we consult with, that we have a contract with to consult with. And we've gotten some information from them about, you know, what is typical out there in the marketplace as a match from an employer. And it's typically, you know, in that 3 to 5% range is what they see typically for those matches. So you contrast the 3 to 5% match to, you know, an 85%, a 61%. You know, right now we've got a sweetheart at 49%. So you can see right there the big difference in numbers that you're talking about from a cost standpoint as an employer matching employee contributions. What that does, though, is that helps us on the financial side some. But the biggest thing that it does, in my opinion, is it gives us flexibility in the marketplace for staff. You know, 20 years ago, there are lots of things that are available now as an employer that you can offer to your employees that didn't exist 20 years ago. The marketplace is constantly changing when it comes to what benefits you can offer and what options you can offer to an employee. And currently, under the pension system we just don't have flexibility with that. Moving into a new plan that we control, that's our plan, we would have that flexibility. So, you know, right now, we are told 3 to 5% match is sort of what you see out in the marketplace. In 15 years, it may be something completely different. If we are still in the pension system, we don't have control over that. But if we have our own defined contribution plan, we can amend our plan and match what's out there in the marketplace and be able to compete for staff that are, you know, high caliber staff like we are used to having here. We'll be able to compete for out in the marketplace with the market employers. This makes us a little more nimble in that regard. It also could, with financial with the financial savings on the annual costs of being in a plan, it gives us options of, can we look at other benefits to offer our employees, whether that's something that, we're just making available to them that they can take the advantage of themselves, that they can do something with their money themselves that doesn't require us to do something financially, or if there's something that comes along in the marketplace. It's very common that we're trying to compete with market employers for staff. We could potentially offer, even if there was some cost to us. So it provides us with some nimbleness out in the marketplace. So this is going to be some rehash for you on what we have to do on a hard exit. Whether we do a soft freeze or a hard freeze, we are required under the law to provide an alternative pension plan that would be a defined contribution plan. We have met with and had discussions with Kentucky Deferred Compensation, and we are in process of completing the paperwork to be able to establish that plan through Kentucky Deferred Comp. This offers us a couple of advantages. Number one, the administrative costs with Kentucky Deferred Comp are highly competitive, if not better than anything we could find out in the marketplace. And number two, our employees are used to working with Kentucky Deferred Comp. Many of our employees already have accounts there. They may have a 401k, they may have a 457B, they may have an IRA there, but that's something that's available to our employees already. And we have many employees who already take advantage of that. They're familiar with it, and it's convenient and would, we feel, add some comfort to the employees that they're moving to something familiar as opposed to a wholly new, different provider. So under the bill, under House Bill 1, on an exit, we are required to adopt an alternative retirement program. It has to be a defined, it cannot be a defined benefit plan. And it doesn't specifically state that it can't be a defined benefit plan, but it states that it can't be a plan that could result in an unfunded balance, which is a defined benefit plan. The plan must cover the employees not participating in KERS. So if it's a soft freeze, that would be the tier 3 employees would have to be transitioned over into this plan. If it's a hard freeze, then everyone would be transitioned over into the plan. It can be voluntary, so it doesn't have to require the employees to contribute to it. It can be an option for the employees to contribute to. So if I, as an employee, decide I don't want to contribute anything to the new defined contribution plan, KHC can establish that plan in such a way that those employees don't have to. They can elect to not contribute anything to that plan. So for example, if we have a tier 1 employee who intends to eventually retire from KERS, even if we hard exit, whether they have full time in and are eligible to retire now, or they need to, have a couple more years of service to retire, but they intend to go work for a participating agency and get that time and fill out that time, and they're going to have that tier 1 retirement, and they don't want to contribute to a new defined contribution plan through KHC, they may have that option. And if the successor plan, the new plan, will allow for rollover contributions, then it has to be something that the employees could roll their KERS money into. So to establish the new plan, and these aren't exactly in order here, but so we are required to adopt the new plan, so we're going to have to design a plan. Alan Paw is in the meeting, so if anyone has any questions along those lines, he's available to answer them. But we are in process with working with Alan. And I'm sorry?
I'm sorry. I didn't know I was not on mute.
Okay. So we are in the process of working with Alan and Kentucky Deferred Comp to fill out the paperwork. And as you might imagine, there are lots of options that we have to make decisions on as to how we want to establish that, how we expect it to work, want it to work, and how much flexibility we have in it. And we are looking to have as much flexibility as possible. That way we have that nimbleness that I spoke about earlier. We have to select a trustee for the investments, and that's been taken care of. That's going to be through Kentucky Deferred Comp, and they have a contract with Nationwide to provide services along those lines. We have to choose a vendor or record keeper. Again, that's been decided. That's Kentucky Deferred Comp and Nationwide. We have to have board action on the plan document. So we will have to bring that plan to the board to get board approval of the plan to adopt it. We have to get KERS approval. So once the decision is made, if it's a decision to make a hard exit or a soft exit, then I'm going to go through the list of what we have to provide with KERS. But one of the things we have to provide is the plan, and KERS has to approve it as a plan that qualifies under the statute to allow us to exit. We will need to communicate employee elections. So we've already talked with Kentucky Deferred Comp. They have done some meetings with our staff last year, but we would have them come out and meet. Well, they won't come out and meet with them in person, but we'll arrange for them to meet and consult with our staff to explain their options and how the plan's going to work. Kentucky Deferred Comp has been very accommodating in meeting with our staff and has said that they will always be available to meet with employees to discuss options. And then the last one there, submit the IRS application. We actually kind of get around that by using Kentucky Deferred Comp and Nationwide. All qualified plans, all qualified retirement plans have to be approved by the IRS. So you have to put together a plan document and you submit it to the IRS, and the IRS reviews that and determines whether or not it meets the requirements to be a qualified plan under the tax code. By using Kentucky Deferred Comp and Nationwide, they have quote unquote canned plans. These are plans that they've already submitted to the IRS and received IRS approval, and they put blanks in there for your name and those things, and you have options that you can elect under there, and it will still qualify under the IRS approval, but you avoid having to go through that process of submitting the document to the IRS and await them approving that document by using one of these quote unquote canned plans that Kentucky Deferred Comp and Nationwide have available. So that's where we are on the defined contribution plan. I'm going to pause right there just to offer people an opportunity to ask questions of me and or Alan. Again, Alan's on the line, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have about the defined contribution plan at this point. Hearing none, I'm going to move on to exactly what we have to do with respect to KERS upon a determination by the board that we would either engage in a hard exit or a soft exit. So they have promulgated a form called it's a Form 7727. It's basically a one-page form. It's kind of a cover sheet for a package. I liken it to an IRS transmittal form, if anyone's familiar with those. For example, when you file as an employer W-2s with the IRS, you have a cover form for that goes on there, and it's just a summary of what's on the W-2 documents. That's the Form 7727. We have to provide documentation of the replacement defined contribution plan, which I just discussed. We have to provide KHC's most recent 5 years of audited financial statements and independent auditors' reports. We have those on hand and can provide those relatively easily. The sort of 500-pound gorilla in the room when it comes to all of this is we have to provide an encrypted electronic file that includes the following information for anyone who has ever worked at KHC. We are about to celebrate our 50th year of being in existence in 2022. So we have to provide this information for anyone who ever worked at KHC during those 50 years. We have to provide their full name, their last known address, their date of birth, their social security number or a systems member identification number, their beginning date of employment, their date of employment end, if applicable, their sick leave balance, and their beginning and ending dates of any active duty military service of employees, if available. And that's active duty military service if we know about it when they were at KHC as an employee, or when they weren't at KHC as an employee, if we know about that. So as you might imagine, 50 years ago in 1972, things weren't really kept on a computer. So this is the real sort of bear that we have to deal with, is gathering this census data for all of these employees who ever were at KHC. With that process has already begun. It's proving difficult, but we believe that we can meet that deadline by April 30th of getting that over. And frankly, we need to get that over there well in advance of April 30th, so that if there were any problems with our paperwork, that we would have an opportunity to correct those. So as you can see, it's a daunting task. That's why we have asked the board to meet in March to make this determination, so that we have plenty of time to get all of this together and submit it across the street to effectuate the decision of the board. So at this point, I'll pause again, and if anyone has any questions, frankly, Jim or Amy would probably be best to answer questions about the census data and our gathering of that, but we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. Hearing none, we have at the end of the presentation a sheet here, and we are going to send this PowerPoint out to each of you immediately after this meeting. So you will have a hard, well, you won't have a hard copy, but you'll have a copy of this for yourself. Obviously, this is a huge decision to be made by the board, and we want you to have as much information as possible to make that decision and make the best decision possible. And we meet once a month for an hour or two and go over this stuff, but as you move towards our March meeting, at which you will be voting on a recommendation to make to the full board at the March meeting of the board, we want to make sure that you have all this information available to you at hand to review. And obviously, as you do so, if you have questions, the executive team stands ready to answer those and be available to you if you have any questions, or you're going through it and you remember something was said, but you can't quite remember what it was. We are always available to answer any questions. So you can reach out to any member of the executive team. We will help you get that answer. And with that, I will turn it back over to Jim.
Thank you, Jeremy.
I have a quick question. Why are some things highlighted in green?
On this schedule, we're about to go through it. Green is good. Generally,
Okay.
green is good
Okay.
with respect to the effect on KHC of each one of these impacts or controls.
Okay.
Yes, we put this grid together to help us and hopefully help you all on the committee to understand a little bit better, what impacts us, which are favorable impacts or unfavorable impacts, and what control do we want of the future. And if we have high control, then that would be a favorable impact. And so the green is what is considered based on either the item or the impact or control of that item. Green is a good score. Okay, so if we start with the ongoing pay-in rate, and you look at the four options, we've already spoken a little bit to that. Option 1A, no HB8, 85% pay-in rate. Then it's 60% pay-in rate. Then it drops to a low 3.5 to 3 to 5% impact rate. And so the ongoing pay-in rate, the lower it is, the less impact, the better from a financial standpoint of that particular impact. And to be honest with you, the option 2 soft freeze impact of low 3 to 5% should also be greened, because that's an equal impact on option 3. We just missed that. Apologize for that. But then you look at the control over the pay-in rate. You can see that we have virtually no control if we stay in KERS of how much we're going to pay from one year to the next. We're at the mercy of the performance of that fund, changes in actuarial assumptions, changes in how the plan is being structured, what have you. Then you go over to the soft freeze, we have reasonably high or very high impact on the front end cost. But it's interesting that we have to prepay the tier 1 and 2 participants for the soft freeze. And if they leave before they've exhausted the actuarial assumption that prepayment was based on, we don't get a refund. And so we do have the possibility of leaving some money on the table. And then when you go to the hard freeze, the front end cost is high to very high, depending on, it's all high because it's a big number. And so you can see how that particular control would work. So anyway, if we are strategically trying to place the corporation in a position to manage its own affairs, then having high control over the ongoing pay and rate is where we want to be. Going to the next item, the front end cost. Obviously, the staying in the plan, there is no front end lump sum or other accommodation to defease the unfunded actuarial liability other than over the 30-year pay-in rate. Whereas on the soft freeze, we have a very high front end cost and no refund if the employee leaves. And then again, the hard freeze, the hard freeze then also has a very high to very high cost, which is not the best, and that's why it's not green from a front end cost standpoint. If you look at the next category, overall PV costs, that's the present value of the costs. Even though we have a low front end cost on the option 1A, no HB8, because the pay-in rate is so high, you have a very high impact, very high PV cost of staying in with no HB8. You have a high cost of staying in with HB8. With the soft freeze, it's very high again because we're prepaying as if 1s and 2s are staying in the plan, and then then it's just high as opposed to very high with the hard freeze. And let's remember that I would like for the impact on the overall PV cost on the hard freeze to be low, but we have a massive unfunded liability. There's no way it's not going to be a high number to get out of this pickle we're in, whether it's us, the state, or any other of the participating agencies. And so in this case, high cost is not a good thing, but it's better than a very high cost, which is why high gets the green light on the schedule. Then how much pension control is KHC going to have under any of these options? And we will have very little design control, benefit structure control, or what have you, if we stay in KERS. But if we go to a DC plan, it'll be within our control. So we'll have high control over that. And then we can be, as Jeremy says, nimble, or we can be reactive to the personnel market and the benefits and compensation benefits market that's going to be out there, so that we can tune our combination of comp and bennies to the prevailing market, as opposed to being stuck with a very rigid benefit structure and limited amount to control that down the road. Then you look at plan investment performance. The impact is very high if we stay in KERS, because if it does not perform well, then it's going to be charged back to us. Or if it performs very well, again, it's going to be a high impact. It can go either way. But in the soft freeze, where we're in a defined contribution plan, it's the performance is borne by the employee and the design of and the investment opportunities that the employee avails him or herself to. And this is where the paternalistic way of the defined benefit plan completely gives way to the everything's under the employee's control of the 401k or type or the defined contribution plan. It takes the exposure off of KHC and shifts it to the employee. But that is the way plans have been going. The days of the very paternalistic approach toward pensions has given way to the not quite so paternalistic. Then when you look at the control, we have very little control over what we as an organization have very little control over what KERS invests in, and we would have very little control over what the employees would invest in as well. So we have no control over plan performance, whether it's DB or DC plan. It's in the hands of others. From an overall compensation and benefits standpoint, which is really the strategic look-see that we're trying to get to, because we can't control a lot of the benefit side, if we stay in, we have low control there, and then it goes to high control. in the defined contribution plan world, where we can tune the compensation level with a tuning also of the defined contribution plan, and give us the ability to react to the hiring and recruitment market that's out there, instead of being hamstrung by some less rigid or more rigid structures. Then Jeremy touched a little bit on the execution hurdles. It's not going to be a big deal to stay in from an execution standpoint, and we've got to find every employee that ever worked for Kentucky Housing Corp if we do a freeze. And so there's going to be a lot of scrambling and record building and digging stuff up to be able to actually get the information that's required to exit the plan. And my understanding is KRS wants that information, not so much because they want to make sure that the people they say are KHC folks that are exiting the plan are truly KHC folks. So it's like a back check on the information they have. When Jeremy says we don't have automated data going back to 72, that's true, but KRS does, because anybody that's worked here, it becomes part of how they calculate the benefit. So it's a double check on the information they have, so by the time we're going to submit that information after June 30th, or excuse me, we're going to submit it by April 30th. They're going to run the numbers as of June 30th. We're not going to hear back the final number until sometime late in calendar 21 or possibly early 22 to determine exactly how much we're going to have to pay to get out, if that is the direction that we go. And then from an ongoing hurdle standpoint, monitoring KRS it takes time, it takes effort, it's something that we have to pay a good bit of attention to see where legislation is, what direction the wind's blowing with the General Assembly. We have to at least be mindful of the investment performance. We get the investment return report every month from KRS. We have to look at the assumptions on the actuarial analyses. So from an ongoing standpoint, there's a lot of monitoring that has to go on. Now, from a ongoing standpoint with the DC plan and options 2 and 3, yes, there's a management component to that. But it's going to be proactive with the recruiting market and the benefits market, as opposed to reactive to what's going on in KRS. So, when we finished looking at this, the greens kind of piled up on the option 3 hard freeze in connect, from a standpoint of the mission, which at the outset of today's conversation, being able to deliver the mission in the future is the paramount objective or need from the determination of our management, is where we need to be biasing the decision. And so I think this grid does give a good plus and positive, negative kind of impact or analysis of what the different options are, and really still does make the hard freeze besides for the financial standpoint, but the overall ability to react to the markets in the future gives us control of our own destiny. And that's all we've got. At this point, Jeremy said that we'll send out the full PowerPoint to all the members of the committee. We are always here to help answer questions. We encourage questions. We encourage challenges. We want to make the best possible decision for in a balanced environment for the corporation and our employees and the bottom line. And so it's a very tough three masters to serve. We think we've pretty much settled on the hard freeze as being the one that is financially most expedient, but also gives us the ability to deal with what could possibly confront us in the future. We entertain any input. There's going to be people impacted. We're going to be impacted corporately. Individuals are going to be impacted. But the pickle that we're in needs to be resolved. And it's a hell of a pickle, and everybody, whether it's the state with being 75% of KERS or the quasis who the remaining 25%, each of us is facing some tough decisions, and all the decisions are expensive. And so, we've tried to marshal some resources to be able to put a real nice down payment in the form of a lump sum and then finance the difference, and be able to be rid of this in relatively short order. And so then we can get a good running rate starting 5 or 6 years from now, of how much we can generate internally, on a not having to worry about being whipsawed, and be able to really marshal resources that can go back into the Commonwealth instead of having to be squirreled away to get rid of this pension issue that we're facing. Any questions, comments?
Let me just comment that Chairman Denham has sent his apologies to me, and says that the situation at the bank today is just had things developed that he had absolutely no control over, that required his attention, and that he would catch up with us with a report from us following the meeting, as well as we'll send him the report as well as the minutes, et cetera. So we'll follow up there. I believe the other item on the agenda was any comments or from members of the committee or staff that have not already been made. I just, since I'm speaking, I'll go ahead and mention that. Is there anything in that regard that we will see? Of course, all of you, we certainly do appreciate your service, and we realize we are asking a lot of you all these days, and in fact, we'll see you again hopefully on Thursday for our regular board meeting, which will not be addressing the pension issues at all. We will address those again at the next special committee or the next meeting of this committee, which is next month, and then the presumably the decision of the full board about the with regard to the pension will be at next month's board meeting.
Winston, this is Amy, and I have an answer to Secretary Johnson's question from earlier about the staff that were starting between 2006 and 2008. So in that small period of time, we filtered it really quickly. We think we have 11 to 12 staff that fall within that time range. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. I was on mute. Sorry.
You're very welcome.
Jeremy, if there's not anything else, I suppose Secretary Johnson can conclude the meeting with a call for a motion. I don't know, is there any other business?
There's no other business. If no one had any questions or comments, then yes, Secretary Johnson, at your will, we can entertain a motion to convene.
You said it so well. I'll entertain. Oops, hold on. Then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Steve makes a motion.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Barry will second it.
Thank you, Barry. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you all very much. We will see you all Thursday.
Thank you very much.
Have a very good presentation.